ES 2015, Webpack, and a couple of other tools. So why don't you jump right in on the topic of ES 2015. What does ES stand for? What does this give to us?
Awesome. So ES stands for ECMAScript. All right. So if you think about JavaScript, JavaScript is actually not the standard name for JavaScript. It's actually ECMAScript. And the evolution of JavaScript has been really interesting over the past couple of years. We've seen a big acceleration of the evolution in JavaScript in terms of language features, sort of what you can do, the APIs that are changing. And recently, ES 2015 was standardized, and this was version 6 of the ECMAScript standard. All right, and it's not actually called ES 6 as much, because ES 6 was some of the features in ES 2015 and some of the upcoming features in ECMAScript 2016. All right, so but if you wanted to call them all ES 6, you can. What we're actually going to be talking about the ones that have already been standardized the summer of last year. That's ES 2015.
Okay.
All right, so among those features that are really, really handy to us as React developers is the classes and the module system. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you what classes look like in JavaScript as of the ECMAScript 2015 standard.
Okay.
So let's take a look at it. So what you'll see on my screen is this amazing GitHub repo from Luke Hoban, who basically covers all of the ECMAScript 6 features that have been introduced. And the first one that I sort of want to highlight is the classes pattern. Now, if you look at this, it looks great. It looks very similar to Java classes. You see you have your class, and then the name of the class, and extends something. You can have a constructor and the super function that calls the parent constructor.
Remy, can you blow that font up a little bit?
Absolutely. So there we go. That's better. So you'll see here you've got your constructor. This refers to the instance of this class. Okay. So that's really nice. You can have functions, getters and setters, and then static functions, which we won't talk too much about. But essentially, if you really think about it, it's just very simple syntactic sugar over the existing prototype object-oriented stuff that you could do with JavaScript already.
Okay. Right.
So it's just like an easier way for you to build the same thing that you were able to do before. So that's one of the features that's really handy. The other features are enhanced object literals. This one's really handy because it lets you actually set proper objects, create objects a little bit easier. But there's also a couple of other features that are really handy, including the spread functionality, and you're going to see this quite a bit. So if you look at this piece right here, what you can do here is you can basically call a function, all right, and then pass in, if you put the 3 dots in front of it, you'll actually spread out the array or the arguments or whatever you're trying to pass.
So the array values become arguments?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is an example with a function, but you can also do it with objects, all right? And now this isn't part of the ES 2015 standard, but it is part of ES, the upcoming ES standard. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to open up the React documentation, okay, just to show you that this spreading functionality is actually really powerful when it comes to React. All right, so some of the things that you might have noticed as we were developing is that we kept on passing different props, right? And you can imagine that sometimes you want to pass almost all of the props. So you can actually use the spread right here to pass in this entire props object, so you don't have to manually set the foo and the bar. You can just pass it in as using this spread operator. Now this is a feature that isn't part of ES 2015, but you do get it if you use Babel.
So right there, it's not spreading an array into a list of arguments. It's spreading an object. All of its properties into a list of arguments.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a really powerful feature. So this is actually possible for you to get using Babel, and we'll talk about Babel in a second. But besides this ES6 features, arrows are really handy as well for you to be able to create these basically function shorthands. All right, and they're very, very powerful. You can just sort of pass in like V, and then
arrow functions are wonderful.
Yeah, you can simplify code quite a bit. For cases like when we were mapping things around, we could just create this arrow function that would take like 2 variables, 2 parameters. And then you're able to do something with it, and then it's automatically returned.
Yeah, the best thing about it I was going to say is that if you just put an expression, it automatically returns that expression, and it doesn't require you to put the curly braces around it. So it can really make the syntax terse. And the other thing is that it makes it so that you don't have to do the this dance.
Exactly. So you don't have to bind this because it's scoped to the lexical this, which is a really powerful feature. Yeah, for sure, especially in React. And besides arrows, there's also modules, and you'll notice here that this syntax here, this ability to just import something from a module, that's going to come in really handy when we start importing things from different components. That, and you can also destructure a module. So this is a new feature in ES6. So you can actually pick out certain things that you want to import from a module. Destructuring requires its own explanation. So if we basically go back up here and go to destructuring, I'll just do a little quick explanation. The idea of destructuring is that you're able to actually match certain basically, like you're able to pattern match, some arrays and some objects to parameters or other objects and stuff like that.
Okay.
So you're able to.
So instead of having to like iterate an array and set each of the values independently, you can just set the array en masse. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here, when you're doing that import down here, you're actually destructuring all of the exports object. Well, you're actually destructuring a couple of those objects into a couple of those functions into the sum and the pi.
So then that gives you a way to kind of select just the pieces of a module that you're going to use, and you automatically have those named values.
Exactly. So those are some of the really handy features of ES6 that we're going to be using to basically be building our components. You didn't need to see me scroll through all of that.
But it's a lot.
But it is a lot of stuff.
I always tell people you should go through whenever there are what's new, in new frameworks or languages or whatever. Go through and at least see it once so that you know that it exists, so that you don't spend some months doing something the whole wrong way. You can always go back to the documentation and figure out how to do it, but knowing that it exists has a lot of value in it itself.
Yeah. No, that's so true.
So now a good time to talk about Babel and what that offers us?
Yeah. So Babel is a transpiler. We talked about it earlier in the first module. And what's happening in this project, and actually using React in general, you need some type of transpiler to convert the JSX into JavaScript. The Babel functionality here is basically allowing us to convert ES 2015 features into into JavaScript code that functions in ES5, so the older versions of the JavaScript standard. So that's what Babel does, and the way that Babel makes this work is through using this plugin architecture that lets you preset what features that you want set up. All right. So what we have in our project is setting up both the React preset, which comes with a couple of things. So let's actually take a look at it, and the ES 2015. Preset as well. So if you take a look at the React preset, there's a couple of things. One, it has the syntax flow and JSX, so that lets us actually transform JSX into actual JavaScript, and it has a couple of other things as well. The preset for so you can see all the presets here. The preset for ES 2015 adds in all of these features that basically transform for example, the for of into something that's that works across older browsers.
So if you want kind of all of ES 2015, you just use the ES 2015 preset, and that brings in everything.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I actually think that you should always be using Babel, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, even if your browser does support these new ES 2015 features, like Microsoft Edge supports a lot of these features, I still want to support older browsers or people who just haven't updated yet.
Right.
So you should always compile with Babel, even if you're not writing ES 2015 code necessarily, right? Because let's say that you accidentally copy code from something that is using an ES 2015 feature, well, then it wouldn't matter anymore. You're transpiling anyways.
Yeah.
Right. So you're able to use sort of the next generation of JavaScript now, and that's really powerful.
And I would say maybe not just always use Babel, but always use a transpiler, because I use TypeScript a lot, and that's serving the same function. Then I really don't have the need for Babel.
Exactly. Yeah. So essentially, that's what we wanted to show for Babel. in our Webpack configuration that we'll go through at the end of this module, you'll see where we actually use the Babel loader to transpile our JSX and our ES 2015 code into regular JavaScript.
All right. Okay, so that covers it for the features in ES 2015 that we need to at least have on our radar, and then what Babel's doing, because that's definitely a part of this project.
Yeah.
And then we're going to look more at
ES 2015 classes and using classes with React components.
There you go, and we'll start plugging that into our sample application here.
Yeah.
All right, so stay with us. Hey everybody, moving right along on the topic of React, and now let's take some of the stuff that we learned in our last module about ES6 and let's actually apply that. So let's learn about ES6 modules and extending our React classes with those.
Awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive right back into the code here. And what you'll notice is that our file has been progressively getting much and bigger, right? Like we've sort of crossed...
We've packed all these components inside one file.
Exactly. We're like we've crossed 150 lines of code. So let's actually split this up using ES6 modules and ES6 classes. So just to show you how to just import a file out, what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to create a new folder called components. All right, it's going to contain all of my component files. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a message.js file for our message component. It's a very simple component. It's a good one to start with. So if I go down into message, I can just straight up copy this out, okay, or cut this out and then paste it right in here, okay. And then from the top right here, there's a couple of things I probably want to do. I want to import React from React, the module. So here we are. I'm using ES6 style modules right away, okay.
So this is instead of a require, right?
Exactly. Instead of a require, I'm using ES6 style modules. And then I'm also going to import the pure render mixin from React add-ons, pure render mixin, assuming I could type. And that's pretty much all I need to do. And then in our app.js, I'm going to want to import this component again. So I'll just put it right at the top, var message from components /message.
Require?
We don't need to do that. Well,
so you want to import?
You shouldn't need to do that. So it actually should.
I think you need to import then.
Oh, sorry, I wrote var. You are right. My bad. I'm like, what? What are you saying? You're right. I'm supposed to write import right here. I was just following what I already typed out.
Right.
So we can actually mix and match like ES6 modules.
Yeah. Well, because it's just converting. It's just transpiling that import into a require, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And actually, even the require is being transpiled to work with the Webpack require.
Okay.
It's a little bit different. So now that this is running, if I just go back here and I just go into our conversation, whoops. If I just go into our localhost 8080, you'll see everything's working the same way it was before. Actually, no, we do have an error here.
Oh, good. These are fun to resolve.
Fun errors. So this error here is because we're not able to create the element, and that is true because if we remember in our message.js, we never actually exported this module. So we can't actually get the message component until we type in export default message, and now what you'll see...
Is default an ES6 thing, or is it a React thing? Okay.
Yeah, it's a ES6 thing. So now if we look at our Webpack, it seems to be working. And if I go back here, there's my message. So everything is working as expected. Yep. So the next thing that we'll probably want to do is actually use the React class mechanism. And there's quite a simple way to do this. So we're going to do this for our message component. Now, I'm not going to do it for every single file that I have, simply because that's going to take a long time to actually to go through that. Sure. I will show you the end result, though.
Okay.
But I'm just going to do it with the message class right here. So I can change this to say class, all right, and then I want it to extend the React component.
Okay, that makes good sense. That reads better.
Yeah, and I could get rid of this parentheses right there and this one. And what you'll notice is a couple of things that no longer work. One is you can't just have properties like this anymore. You don't need the commas anymore. So let's actually fix this up. The first thing I'm going to want to do is actually put this correctly. So now this is properly rendering. Okay. And the next thing I want to do is I also want to actually change this mixins property. So the way that mixins work with ES6 classes is that you actually have to do a little bit more work to set them up. So we're going to want to create a constructor, okay, that takes the props that are passed to it. We'll pass those props up to the parent constructor. And now for the pure render mixin specifically, we're going to want to actually change the should component update method and set that to the pure render mixin should component update method bind to the this here to make that work. So a couple of things are happening here. You see that we're binding this again. All right. So in the React component, when you're using the class system, React does not auto bind everything for you anymore. So you actually have to bind things manually. Now, I know that could be tedious for a lot of people. Nobody wants to do all of that extra typing, and it's you might forget certain things, or you might forget to do that. So there's a couple of tools that you can use to actually do that for you. Among them is this module called AutoBind. So what we're going to do is, the way it works is that you basically just run it inside your constructor. It's designed specifically for React, and it will auto-bind things for you, so you no longer have to worry about it. I've seen another library that uses a decorator instead. So instead of having to create a constructor, you would just add auto-bind, and then it would just do the binding for you for that class. The reason why I'm not as much of a fan of that method as this method is simply because it adds in an extra, basically adds in an extra step in your Babel compilation process, because decorators are not part of the ES 2015 standard, and they're being rewritten right now. So even according to Babel, if you're using Babel 6.0, the decorator plugin is now considered a legacy decorator plugin, even though it is experimental. So it's called legacy because they're rewriting how it's supposed to write and how you're supposed to use it. So for the moment, it just seems to be make a lot more sense to just use the AutoBind module inside your constructor than the decorator, even though the decorator is much cleaner and nicer. So that's pretty much all you need to do to set this up as a class. Now, I'm not going to do that for every single one. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop open my ES6 module here and go to the fork here. Okay, and then I'm going to open this up with Visual Studio Code. And what you'll see here is I've got my app. I've actually put everything inside the components folder, and I've renamed my app.js to just be routes.js because that's all it has.
Okay.
It just has the app and the conversation pane that's imported, and it just renders the route. And then this app basically gives you the same effect as if you had everything in using just create class or using require methods.
And then this JS file just has a couple of your components referenced, the ones that it needs
that the router
route
needs.
to.
Yeah. So if you take a look at the code is almost exactly the same. Component will mount here is the same one. All the disks, because we've used the AutoBind, are actually going to properly be referenced here, including the disks inside the render functions. So that pretty much gets you set up for ES6 classes using the React component. You're able to get that set up like so.
That's excellent. Okay, well, that does it for that topic. Our next one, we're going to be talking about the React developer tools.
Yes.
All right, join us for that for sure. Hey everybody, we're in the middle of a big course on React.js, and we are talking in this module about a variety of tools that you'll use as a React.js developer. One of those tools is the React Developer Tools, aptly named. What's the React Developer Tools, Remy?
So they're a bunch of extensions for your browser. So the React Developer Tools right now is a Chrome extension, but there's also a Firefox extension as well.
Okay.
And essentially what it does is it adds a tab into your developer tools that basically connects into the React application and is able to show you the props and the states for every single component. So let me take you through what that looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into my browser right here. And I've got our sample app already set up. You'll notice that it's actually got a little bit, a few nicer features than before, a little bit of a nicer polish. So you'll see what we did there in the next part of this module. But before we jump into sort of how we polish things up a little bit, what I do want to show you is this is the DevTools, and then there's this React tab that has been added. So what it does is it actually adds basically the entire component tree to the right side here, to the left-hand side here, so that you can actually sort of see that this is the router history. This is like the button up there. This is the inbox pane. And what's really neat is if I click on the inbox pane, I can see the props that have been passed into this inbox pane, including the humans object that we've been referencing so often. So I'm able to actually examine like what it says and what's inside. If I look at the app history one, you can see that this is the children's prop that's passed in by the router. But you can notice that it also passes in a bunch of other stuff as well, including the history, the params that we saw that basically map to the URL IDs, the route that it was in, and as well as you can even see the state that's in that component, so the app component, including the humans and the stores, and pretty much all of these pieces. So it's a really handy tool, and it works in a bunch of different browsers. You can even search by component name as well. So let's say I'm looking for a message component. I can basically get all of the message components right here, and I'm able to examine every single one, see what props have been passed in. So I can do a couple of really interesting things with this. The other cool thing that we could do is you can also set it to trace for React updates. So anytime something gets updated, it'll actually like highlight all the components that have been updated. So you'll see there it like highlights all the stuff.
Yeah.
And then here as well. So it's a really interesting thing, really interesting tool, pretty powerful, and I like it quite a bit. It's really handy, and you could also see like pretty much how that maps within the divs and stuff.
So it's a whole lot like the Elements tab, except instead of just showing us the rendered HTML, it's showing us this stuff at a higher level, at a level that makes sense if you were the one that was writing the React application. Now, can I take this and go inspect Facebook?
Yeah, you can actually. So I'm not going to log into my Facebook account because I don't know what's gonna. I don't know what might show up there. It might be I don't know, random pictures of engineering jokes or something. I'm pretty sure you guys might want to see those pictures. But anyways, don't want to. Anyways.
But you can go to your Facebook.
You can go to your
all
Facebook,
these tools, and you can actually inspect all of the. You'll be able to see all the components that Facebook has used to create the web page.
Exactly. Something that's really handy also is that it adds in like node was deleted if a part of the part of the stuff has been changed as well. So you can even see like when things have been changed.
I think it'd be interesting. I haven't done this yet, but I think it would be interesting to inspect Facebook's page and then go through Facebook, clicking on things and seeing that flash that tells me where. How their data is flowing whenever I click on it.
And you can even see like the props and the states and how they pass those things around, which is really interesting. So that's pretty much it that I wanted to show you with the React developer tools. It's really handy. It's a free extension. It works in Chrome and Firefox. Download it, include it as part of your the developer site like tools and how you debug your debug cycle and how you debug things.
Cool. All right. Well, that wraps it up for this one. Why don't you join us for the next video where we talk more about Webpack?
That's right.
All right, welcome back. Let's go ahead and continue on. We're going to be talking now more about Webpack. We've seen a little bit of it, kind of got an overview of what Webpack does for us, but let's dive in and see how we're using Webpack in this pizza application to make it awesome.
Awesome. So Webpack, what is Webpack? It's basically a bundling application. It's a module bundler, essentially. So if you're building ES6 applications, you might have a bunch of different modules that are separated into different files, And ideally, you don't want to serve like 100 different files to a browser client. You want to sort of bundle a whole bunch of them together. And actually, that's what Webpack does. And this idea of bundling things together actually is really powerful because you can sort of streamline a lot of things. You can have plugins that will optimize your bundle at the end. It will remove code that's never been executed. It'll do a lot of really intelligent things for you. What we're going to set up today is actually I'm going to show you how we set up our Webpack script that takes our ES 2015 code, so all of our latest code. It takes our React, our JSX stuff, and it actually uses the Babel transpiler to load up those JavaScript files, transpile them, and then bundle them up into a bundle.js file. All right, and now that's one of the things that it does. The other thing that it also helps you do is it helps you lets you do a hot module reloading, which is a really cool tool, a really cool feature. It's actually that's the feature that's actually been allowing us to automatically see the changes from our React components directly.
Done,
directly in the browser. We don't even need to refresh; it's already there. So let's get right to it. If you want to check out the webpack.github.io page, that's where you'll find a lot of the documentation. You'll notice that essentially this is a very succinct diagram for what Webpack does. It takes all your JavaScript files that might depend on each other and then just bundles them up into a nice, clean little static asset that you can include in your single-page application, like React, for example. So let's actually take a look at what our Webpack config file does. So this is how you configure Webpack. You can run Webpack, just the command, directly on your command line, and it will output all of this. Or you could run the Webpack dev server, which will spin up a dev server that basically serves the end result of your Webpack without writing it to a file.
Okay.
Like without writing it to disk, it'll just serve it directly to the browser or whoever is asking for it.
Okay.
And that's the Webpack dev server is what allows us to do some of the hot reloading, and I'll show you how to get that running. It's actually already in our package.json file, and it's part of the npm scripts. We've added that in there. So let's take a look first at the config file. You'll notice at the top we've got it's just basically just JavaScript. You're able to require things, including the Webpack module, and then you're going to export this object that's basically a configuration object for a Webpack. In this object, what you'll do is you'll put in maybe a context, right, to say that hey, our app lives inside this directory. So you'll notice that it's in the app directory. And then you're going to give it an entry point. So what's an entry point? It's essentially something that your application, basically Webpack will start from this file, and anything that's imported inside this file, it will sort of bundle all of these things together. So it's like the entry point for Webpack. And there's going to be two of them. One for the JavaScript, so the app.js file, that's sort of our main file that we use. And then the HTML file as well has a bunch of stuff that it needs as well. So we'll also have that as an entry point as well. And then the output is where it's going to output the end result. So you'll see that we're outputting to this path that's basically a dist path in our current directory. So it's going to create another folder called dist. Okay, so I'll show you what that looks like when we run Webpack. And then it's going to bundle things up into bundle.js. So clearly, if I go back to index.html, I'm actually putting bundle.js right away. So even as I'm running the debug server, Webpack knows that when I call for bundle.js, I mean the output of the Webpack module loading. So I can immediately put /bundle.js, and then it will be outputted to the dist folder as well with this inside this index.html. So now, how does Webpack know which module loaders to use? Well, this is where we would specify it as part of the modules property. Okay, and then this module property gives us lets us set an array of loaders. Okay. And a couple of other options that we can also put in so that we can have some things for the module, some options for Webpack. So all of these loaders are actually independent. They're not all part of Webpack. So to actually install Webpack and the loaders, you actually need to npm install a bunch of this stuff. So you can take a look in our dev dependencies. We've got not only Webpack, but we've also installed the CSS loader, the file loader, the React hot loader, the style loader, the URL loader, and the Babel loader, right? So if I npm install any of this stuff, it will actually install all of these dependencies. So if you npm install in this folder, you'll get all of the dependencies that you need. So these loaders are not coming from inside React, from inside Webpack. They're actually coming from individual NPM modules. So if I take a look at the loaders, I'm able to sort of set the loader here. This is an interesting object.